Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome into the program. It's Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts, and we're going to get greedy a little bit here on this show, or at least we're going to talk about
some greed.
Yeah, a little voice of greed. I always think of like the cartoons, Phil, the old school cartoons. You know, the angel and the devil, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One saying one thing, one saying another. So, you know, when it comes to our money, Phil, there's several ways, and of course we get a little bit greedy. And I'm really going to kind of view this right now. It seems like a little late to have this conversation because everybody's not feeling greedy. We're all worried about inflation and the gas prices and everything that's going on. But over the last several years, and you and I have been talking about this for a long time now, it's easy to get lulled to sleep when the market has been on fire the way that it has been, and inflation's been low, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just human nature, right? I mean, so that little angel that was on your shoulder before, now is sitting there pointing his finger saying, "I told you so, told you so."
Yeah. And before, the little devil was going, "You can do it. Put more.
Don't listen. Come on. What are you talking about? Look at this. It's not going to." Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's easy to do, and it's human nature.
It is.
You know, market's going great. I want some of that. I want some of that. You know, I got to get in there. Market was 10% last year. Why didn't I get 10%? You know, it's easy. It's easy to jump in and you know, buy into that, but you got to understand, step back, look at the big picture. That's not what markets do long term. It's not how it works.
Well,
it's hard to argue against that voice of greed.
Oh no, it is. It is. So on this allergy-ridden show, because I think Phil and I are suffering from allergies today. Spring is getting closer.
It's springtime. Yeah, love it but hate it.
That's right. We're going to try to talk about how to recognize the voice of greed and hopefully be able to fight it a little bit, especially now that you know it's a little easier again when things are not so rosy. But hopefully, some of this stuff will be short-lived. So anyway, I got a couple of statements here. I got a couple of general ways that people kind of view some of the things or have in the past couple of years when everything's been so rosy, at least as far as, I suppose I should say that with the caveat, right? Rosy from a financial standpoint with the markets, and so on and so forth, not COVID. So the market's been doing great last 3 years. So it's definitely a good time to invest a little more and be more aggressive. That's probably why you're stressing now here in early 2022 with some of the downturns and the dips, because the last 3 years you've been hitting it hard because you want to be greedy. Let's be honest.
Right. And unfortunately, our greed doesn't happen, you know, right up front. I mean, if we kind of spin this back to the markets in 2008, right? Okay. Bottom of the market coming out of this early 2009, even in 2010, people aren't so greedy then. They're like, it's terrible. Because we remember what just happened, right? Yeah. 15, 16, 18. Now you're thinking, oh, this is great. Look at the markets. Now I'm going to jump in. Now we start to get really greedy, you know, so now and that's just human nature, right? We get to the top of this. Oh, this is great. It's always going to go straight up. Let's jump in. Yeah,
let's roll.
And then you pick up, you know, that's the wrong time. If you're going to get greedy at the bottom, but no one does. That's just not human nature. That's not what we do. Yes. So don't get greedy, you know, with it. Don't look at the emotional side of investing. And that's the bottom line is you got to pull the emotions out of it.
Yeah.
Understand what you're comfortable with, you know? And if you're looking at an investment, don't just look at, but the last 3 years, the last 5 years, the last 10 years, look at what it's done.
Yeah.
Look at reality. Look at the last time it went through a market correction. What did it do? And if you're not comfortable with that, then don't go to the growth side of that and just look at that piece of the equation. You're going to get burned at some point. Sure. Yeah.
It's your ability to tolerate it, right? Because we can all tolerate it. Yeah, we can all tolerate it when it's 30% up and 20% up. But you can't barely tolerate it at 3% down or 5% down, then you're not being really honest with yourself, right? I mean, you're not recognizing the angel and the devil. You're just focusing on the greed. So, yeah, you got to.
And with that, unfortunately, when greed happens like that, we jump in thinking, it's going to go up, and then we jump out at the wrong time.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's like a double-edged sword. Number one, we jump in way too late. So we're not getting fully all of the upside. We're coming in at the very tail end of it. So we're probably going to get some of it.
Yeah.
And maybe even 2 years or 3 years of it. So you get even greedier because you think, this is great. This always goes this way, you know, and then all of a sudden it's going to flip. And then you ride it too long. because you're thinking, oh, well, we're down 15%. Oh, it's, look at COVID, that time frame and the pandemic, and it dropped, it bounced right back, in 15 and 18 when we had some of, these similar volatilities. Mm-hmm. And who knows where we're at? I mean, maybe it will bounce right back, but historically,
the conflict could end and it could go up. Yeah.
You get to these long-term bear markets, it takes an extended period to hit the bottom and come back. It's just what markets do.
And Phil, those indicators are there, right? I mean, every time they sit down to talk in the Ukraine and with Russia, they sit down to have a conversation, even if it's fallen through, the market immediately bounces up. Like just at the time we're taking just yesterday, they did one of those kind of things, and it was down, 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 and then news came out that they were sitting down, that agreed to sit down and talk, and it went up, 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 and then as the day wore on, it went back down a little bit. So it's all reaction.
And then the headlines hit today, talks break down. So
it's falling thing. So and you mentioned jumping in too late. That was kind of my next one, recognizing that voice of greed. It's like, well, I heard this thing, whatever channel it is you're watching or somebody, and I want to jump in on it before, everybody else does. By the time you've heard it, everybody else knows it too.
It's too late. Yeah. You're not hearing anything new. So
you're not getting any hot tip. It's a lukewarm, right? So recognize that and don't, I mean, I get it. We all suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out. We want to
absolutely.
I want to get on crypto. Well, now it's too late. Kind of thing. It's not too late, but it's just one of those things where you're like, it's definitely going to be harder to do than it would have been 5 years ago. And
it's funny you mentioned crypto because I just saw a funny cartoon on that where it had these two doors of and people standing behind them. One of them was a door where it said crypto $37 or Bitcoin 37,000. There was one person in line. Mm-hmm. The other one was Bitcoin 64,000. There's 10,000 people in line for that one. So when the market's flying high, Bitcoin is high. Oh yeah, we got to get in. We're gonna but now it's down to 37. We're like, oh no, that's too risky. You can't do that. Too risky.
Yeah, to your point, exactly. Okay, so this next one here on recognizing the voice of greed feels kind of fun for me, and a lot of us have done this over the last couple of years as well. Whether it's a friend at church or a coworker or your next door neighbor, right? The proverbial keeping up with the Joneses kicks into play. You're chatting, you're having conversations. You find out that they maybe have more saved than you for retirement, or they've picked up a new camper, a new, like you got this, shiny camper or whatever. And it's funny about the keeping up with the Joneses because literally the person that I see sometimes that I feel that way, his last name is Jones. So literally,
so you are literally trying to keep up with the Joneses.
And this is a bad way. So you got to recognize that greed to go, look, you don't know how much the Joneses owe or what the Joneses got going on,
Yeah. So there's, that's a dangerous game, right? I mean, if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, to your point, you don't know. I mean, maybe they're loaded and this is okay for their budget and their spending and what they have saved. Maybe they can't afford it and it's all in debt, it's all credit. So why would you want to keep up with that?
Or they have no college bills for their kids and you do. I mean, there's
you have to understand don't worry about everyone else. Look at your plan. What's your scenario? I mean, I hear this come up, not in that extreme, but a lot of times with clients when I'm, prospective clients, when I'm meeting with them, we'll go through the initial meeting and kind of go through their numbers. And so what do you think? How am I kind of on average with everyone, on target with everyone else? Are we above? I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're where you're at.
Yep.
And how much you have saved doesn't need to compare to anyone else.
Yeah.
That's the old campaign of what's your number just drove me crazy before because everyone's always targeting, oh, I got $1 million. It's got to be $1 million. Well, maybe,
And I think that's the point too, Phil. A lot of times when you're chatting, right? It's like, well, I know that my neighbors or my best friends at church or whatever, they've saved $1 million and I'm not there yet. I mean, whatever the circumstance is, you allow that to creep in and you feel like you've done something wrong. And maybe you have because you haven't taken the time to really start building and finding out where you are from a retirement standpoint. But it doesn't mean you have to swing for the fences back to the market thing and go chasing stuff until you've gotten a plan together or until you've run the numbers to make sure you know where you stand. So that's another way to recognize that voice of greed.
Yeah. So don't worry about the neighbors or, your other friends and colleagues and what they've
right.
Understand what your scenario is. What should you be saving and where should you be at? Or are you on target?
Yep. No, don't chase the Smiths or the Joneses or anything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Emergency fund in the bank.
Yep.
So Fed's going to maybe start ticking up. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, last week as well. They might, and you might get a little bit more back at the bank when this happens. But again, the last several years, you're getting bupkis, right? So,
right.
You know, if it's collecting dust, you start feeling like, okay, I could do something more with this money. And then you maybe put it someplace that's a little more risky. And that's your safety net. That's your emergency fund. So you're getting a little greedy because the bank stinks right now. And I get that.
Yeah. And I mean, so there's two sides of that coin. It's, you know, emergency fund in retirement is always an interesting discussion because all our life we've been trained at, oh, it's got to be 3 to 6 months of, you know, income that we would need. And where did that come from? Well, I lose my job. It might take 3 to 6 months to generate, you know, to get a new job. So I need to have this cushion to be able to pull from. Okay. You lost your job, you're retired. So you don't need that concept anymore. It doesn't matter. Your income should be built into a plan that you're getting this monthly income for life, right? So that plan's built out to provide income. So to me, an emergency fund in retirement is simply truly that safety net of, you know, okay, I have, you know, the roof blew off, some major thing like that, or I've got a big opportunity or, you know, expense that comes up that I want to be able to do. And I don't want to have to try to figure out at that point, where's it going to come from? You know, I can go grab the money and then worry about replacing that at a later date. You know, so I mean, that to me is an emergency fund and really where it fits in retirement. And to your point of, you know, rates and they're low today. Mm-hmm. Again, let's go back to history and understand the reality of it. There's never a point in history where the money in the bank's growing greater than inflation, long term, right? I mean, it's just it doesn't happen. I mean, you think about the 80s, right? We just talked about it. You get 9% at the bank, and what was inflation? You know, you were paying what 13, 18% on a mortgage.
Yeah,
it just doesn't happen.
That's true.
You know.
But our brain doesn't remember it that way. Our brain doesn't.
No, that way because we're looking at today. Oh, 9%. That's if I get 9% in the bank, that'd be great. Well, yeah, but you can't. You know, everyone would be in the bank today, but that's not reality because when 9% was happening in the bank, you know, all the other rates were double digits. You know, so you have to bring everything in perspective.
There you go.
So
that right there is recognizing the voice of greed. So perfect on this conversation piece, Phil. So all right, so last one then, and this one's kind of fun too. So again, over the last couple of years, you know, well, I'm just better off doing it myself versus giving my money away to a professional to do it. You know, like yourself, Phil. And again, the last 3 years, you could throw a dart at the dartboard of the indexes and do good. You know, more than likely, you probably did pretty well. Do pretty well. If you threw a dart at the dartboard and you picked an index. But it's when things get scary, it's when things get rocky that people feel like, well, now I need a professional. So again, it's greedy to think, well, I'm not giving away my 1% to an advisor or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, it really comes down to understanding what that 1% goes to. And there's two sides to that advisory equation, or should be at least, in my mind, how we work, right? So when you're paying us our advisory fee, it's not just for investment advice. I mean, that's a big component of it, right? Structuring investments, how it fits your plan, but it's also managing a plan. I mean, you have to have a plan to begin with and understand what are we trying to accomplish? What is our goal? Personally, we've talked about it over and over, but our plan and how we manage investments then comes back to that plan. It says we're bucketizing money from a risk standpoint, those now, soon, and later buckets. You know,
Phil, I would argue that you're managing the person too, though. I would argue that
it's a huge piece of it, right? Yeah, I mean, and exactly, we're managing then the expectations and the emotions, helping our clients walk through these times. You know, because we have clients. Oh yeah, hey, what about Bitcoin? Or what about, the market's, up 20%. Why aren't we up 20%? Well, let's have that discussion. Let's walk through, and it's a matter of helping bring that voice of reason, into some of these discussions and questions you have along the way. And, should you do it? And I always tell my clients, look, at the end of the day, it's your money. I'm just here to help. I'm giving you advice. You want my opinion? Here it is.
I'm coaching.
What do you want me to do? Yeah. I'm a coach.
Yeah. So let me frame this and tell me if I'm wrong with this, Phil, or correct me. But so if you're thinking about, well, I'm not going to spend that money. Well, Vanguard is one of the cheapest options out there, right?
Right.
If you're doing it yourself, right? And even Vanguard put out a thing saying that they found that people who use financial professionals advisors see something, I think it was like 2 or 3% improvement, higher returns. And this is from the cheapest company out there. So what does that tell you, right? So it tells you there can be value in using a professional, especially when you're transitioning from accumulation to preservation, which is retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many pitfalls and decisions you're going to be faced with. You've got to have a plan to understand how does all this work.
Yeah.
And then the advisor can be that voice of reason to help walk you through the reality of what this looks like, right? Because that's our job. We're not looking at just today, right? And inflation's a great example because there's a lot of people that are panicked about inflation today. It's a high number.
Yeah.
Look, inflation isn't a today problem. Inflation is a plan long-term problem. You should have had this built into the plan from the beginning. If you didn't, maybe you should be a little bit panicked or concerned, but look at it, build it in long-term, and that's where an advisor can help. Hopefully they have built that in.
Yeah.
So it's part of the equation, but
you didn't have 8% built in, but hopefully you had something built in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, back to the discussion on spending. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to overestimate because all of a sudden you put an 8% inflation and it's like, oh man, I'm going to need like $5 million to retire today. Well, that's not realistic either.
Right,
I mean, come on.
Yeah. I like how you said that. So let's recognize the voice of reason, not the voice of greed. That'll do it for this podcast. Phil, thanks for hanging out with me and chatting about this stuff. It's easy to do when times are great. It's a little tougher when times get a little scary, and that's certainly what we're starting to face now. So we're in the first quarter of 2022 and coming off the last 3 years financially. It's easy to have gotten greedy, understandable, but we got to, we got to rethink that game plan a little bit. So if you need some help, reach out to Phil. Stop by the website, philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher. You can download the, if you have the app on your phone already, you can just check out the podcast that way. You can get it on YouTube. Whatever the case is, you can reach out to Phil through the website. So just stop by philstaxhacks.com, and we'll see you next time right here on the program.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.